The question is, the Amendment 16 be made? Sir Edward Leigh.
Mr Chairman, I beg to move new clause 3, standing in my name. It delivers now full fiscal autonomy, real home rule and the Scottish Parliament in control of everything save defence and foreign affairs. I'm only a backbencher without the resources of government officials. If it is defective in technical detail, I apologise. But if it were voted for tonight, it would establish a clear principle and a way forward. The contention is clear. The new clause delivers full fiscal autonomy. The Scottish Parliament would have full freedom to raise all taxes as it likes, not just fiddling around with bans, but all thresholds, all VAT dividends, and it would have full freedom to spend this as it likes. That's what real parliaments do. That's why they're responsible. The Scottish Parliament at present, and even if the Smith Commission proposals are adopted, is constructed in a manner inherently conducive to the culture of grievance. It will raise only 50% of what it spends. Worse, under the 30-year-old discredited Barnett formula, which even its conceiver condemned towards the end of his life, its block grant would be based not on needs but on English levels of spending. No matter which tartan is chosen to clad the Scottish purse in, the purse strings are still controlled by England, and that, I believe, has to change. It is said that following the reports of the Office of Budget Responsibility and the Institute of Fiscal Studies, there is a £7 billion black hole. But presumably the SNP did want independence in the next year. You can't have an independent parliament that doesn't have full fiscal autonomy. And so let's have a real informed debate about these figures. Yes, I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
When the Honourable Gentleman uses the term black hole, does he mean a deficit? Because when people talk about the UK's deficit, they say deficit. When people talk about Scotland's deficit, they say black hole. Why the use of pejorative language?
It can be referred to as a deficit. Let's have an informed debate. We've listened to the Institute of Fiscal Studies, the Office of Budget Responsibility. But by the way, and I will make this clear, I'm not in favour of cutting Scotland loose. I'm in favour of United Kingdom solidarity. I'm in favour of a new grant mechanism if there is a need proven. And so my aim, I have to say, this is not to trap the SNP or call their bluff or reveal their timidity. I genuinely want to give the Scots what they want. Freedom to run their own affairs, not to blame others if things go wrong, and that's surely what they want. But all within the buttresses and safety of the United Kingdom, and I am a fervent unionist. Of course.
Honourable Gentleman, I'm grateful for his giving way. Will the Honourable Gentleman concede that Scotland has contributed more in tax per head of population in each year of the last 34 years, and Scotland, with full economic powers, would be able to deliver prosperity and social justice for the people of Scotland?
Fine. The Honourable Gentleman can vote for my amendment, my new clause. If that's what he believes. It's on offer tonight. He can vote for it. My new clause, as a Number 10 spokesman said helpfully over the weekend, and it's not often that Number 10 spokesmen have supported my new clauses in the past, but I'm very grateful to him, said this new clause is the acid test for the SNP as to whether they will back their own policy. And a Labour Party spokesman helpfully said over the weekend that they can have full fiscal autonomy by 10 o'clock tonight if they want to vote for us.
I'll do my best to be helpful, but my concern is that those of us who have a Eurosceptic point of view, as my right honourable friend does, have always been very cautious about fiscal autonomy without monetary autonomy. And does his amendment also give the Scottish Parliament the ability to have monetary autonomy?
As my honourable friend made that point last week, I was waiting for it. And if he will just be patient for just a moment, I will finish just a couple of lines and I will come directly to him. It's the kernel of the matter. So the Barnett formula, under my proposals, would be scrapped, and an alternative formula would be created based on need. That's what we do. That's what we do in the modern world, in modern finance. We create a formula based on need. I give way to my right honourable friend, and then I'll give way to the honourable gentleman. My right honourable friend.
I'm grateful for my honourable friend giving way at this point, because I do want to raise this issue of the Barnett formula. Does he agree with me that what is actually now going to happen It is not the automatic application of the Barnett formula to solve all of the many issues now between Scotland and the rest of the United Kingdom on money, but there has to be a fundamental renegotiation of the block grant and an attribution to Scotland of revenues by some formula. And so in practice, the whole financial settlement is in the melting pot anyway, so it will be very interesting to see how the SNP respond to his further development.
Absolutely. And we are a United Kingdom, and just as Lincolnshire, for instance, in its educational grant, gets more money because of its sparsity. All these things can be worked out in a constructive manner between the United Kingdom government and the Scottish government to actually have a fair support mechanism based on need, whether it's based on declining oil revenues or sparsity factor, which I've just mentioned, or declining heavy industries, or an ageing population. These are all matters that should determine what the grant is, not some ageing formula based on what England spends, or what the United Kingdom spends. I give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
I find the Honourable Gentleman giving way. He's actually been very clever with his amendment, because is he not ultimately talking about an English Parliament, therefore a federal government in the future? Please go.
My personal view, for what it's worth, is that if we are going to create a sustainable union, we have effectively to create full fiscal autonomy for Northern Ireland, for Wales, and for Scotland, and ultimately for England. And this almost imperial parliament would remain determining the support mechanisms to ensure safety. But yes, so in that sense, I am a federalist. But I think that Barnett is simply a gift to those who want to break up the union. It's also incredibly expensive to the English. £1,680 more spending per head in Scotland than England, because Scottish spending is inextricably linked to English spending. When that is cut, the SNP, quite understandably, I don't blame them for this, they're good politicians, can cry foul as they did last week. They can say the Scots people didn't vote for austerity, but it's being imposed on us. And they can vote on every education, every health measure. They say that what you spend in England on health education is going to determine what we spend. And you get a sort of crazy situation, as I understand. If you sort of raise some taxes in Scotland, the grant will go down. It simply doesn't work. This is not a recipe for preserving the union or for sustainable future.
On the Barnett figures, the Honourable Gentleman mentions the Barnett figures. He will, of course, for completeness, point out that the Barnett figures are only about two-thirds of the spending. And for further completeness, he will point out as well, I'm sure, that the Barnett figures for London and Northern Ireland are higher than Scotland.
I don't want to get, Mr. Chairman, in a sterile debate about whether London subsidises Scotland or vice versa. I simply want to be fair and open. And I'm quite happy for Scotland to have all their oil. They can determine their oil policy, their level of taxation, and as the oil revenues decline, if they inevitably do decline, I'm very happy for the United Kingdom government to step in and to increase its grant. Who? Oh, sorry. Right.
Might not the Right Honourable Gentleman be entering a note of unpleasantness into this debate, which need not be there? Isn't it in the interest of us members representing English seats, for whatever settlement is made to Scotland is durable, taking into account at some stage that will have repercussions to how we settle the English question, and that we ought to do it as generously as possible, because we want this to succeed, not we want it to fail, because the more it succeeds, the more we actually answer the question when we get on to our own requirements for an English Parliament as well.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend, a good personal friend over many years, and he sums it up very well. I mean, I'm not trying to play party political games. I really want to be helpful. I want to create a durable settlement, which is what I understand Scottish people voted for. They want to stay part of the United Kingdom. They want to have that buttress if there's a catastrophic shock and all the rest of it, as in 1929 or 2008, but they want to run their own affairs. But I believe that if we maintain the current Smith formula, combined with English votes for English laws, we are creating a toxic mixture propelling the union towards collapse. And as I said at second reading, we are making the same mistakes as on the Irish question in the 19th century. We're giving too little, too late. But one thing our parliamentary forefathers did get right, and that was not to create two classes of MPs. They simply intended to reduce the number of Irish MPs with full Home Rule, but the Great War sadly intervened, and we know the rest is history. And with the Smith Commission, I think we are really where we were in the Irish question in the early 20th century. I don't believe that you can dribble out powers with complexity of tax powers, etc., thresholds, VAT, airport tax, and maintain support for the Union. The Smith Commission, I believe, was a rapid scissors and tape job, a response to a vow hastily put together by panicked Unionist politicians in the last days of the referendum. It was adequate, maybe, for its time, and I've read it. Actually, I've read it very carefully. It's not that long, but it's now been overtaken by events. And as my honourable friend and my close personal friend, he's one of the most articulate Unionists, Lord Forsyth of Drumbalene, said in the other place recently. I thought I might lose a bit of support there, but he is a personal friend. I was staying with him, actually, over the weekend. All the Unionist parties, he said, stood on a platform of bringing in the proposals of the Smith Commission, and we ended up with 3 seats out of 59. This is not a credible position. It has been rejected. I'm sorry, I say to the government, there is such a thing as democracy. The Smith Commission has been rejected. We cannot just plough on regardless, and we have to listen to what the people have said. I'll give way to the honourable gentleman.
Thank you. Can I thank the member for the spirit in which he's presented this? Can I also say that I heard his original speech, the presentation of the bill, and I agreed with everything he said in the analogies he drew with Ireland. In that spirit, then, can I ask the following? If we are to move to a form of fiscal freedom for Scotland, in the benign sense that he gives it, surely that requires a degree of transition, given the scale of the UK deficit, given the unique circumstances post-2008. And it is the discussion about the transitional arrangements that is the division between that side and this side, not the issue of fiscal freedom itself.
I hear what the honourable gentleman says, and nobody is suggesting that even if my new clause was passed tonight, that suddenly full fiscal autonomy would start immediately. Of course, there has to be a discussion. And inevitably, if oil revenues are declining, there has to be some sort of support mechanism from the United Kingdom government. But I do say that this new clause, I say to my honourable friends over there, this new clause is there. They can have it. Parliament can have it. This is a democratic assembly. This is I don't want to overplay my importance. I suspect that the whips might ensure that my new clause is defeated. But this is an historic opportunity to give full Home Rule, establish the principle for Scotland, which is what the Scottish people want. So the honourable gentleman is now going to tell the House he's going to support my new clause.
I'm seeming very happy with these new clauses at the moment. But what I want to ask him is, he talks about support mechanisms for Scotland, as if that was something unique and something unique to Scotland. Would he concede that the UK has needed its own support mechanisms since 2001 and hasn't actually raised the taxes to match its expenditure since 2001 and is reliant itself on support mechanisms, to use his phrase?
I'm afraid that we're getting into all these historic arguments of who is to blame. Is it the UK government? There is a fundamental problem for the Scottish government in that spending is higher, 20% higher, but tax revenues are inevitably lower. So there is a fundamental problem that they have to... All right, well, I've lost them there. Fair enough. We can have that debate. Let's not get too bogged down on it. But they want independence. They can have it. The fact is... full fiscal autonomy. The fact of the SNP's capture of all but 3 of the Scottish seats is actually even greater than Sinn Féin's victory in the 1918 general election in Ireland. Then the Unionists managed to secure actually 22 of the 105 Irish seats. So I think we have to listen, and this is actually this is a very serious issue which we have to take. Now, can I just make a bit more progress, because I want to get to my honourable friend who's been very patient. I will get to him eventually. Like then, everything is different now. What will happen if Smith stays? Can you sustain a permanent settlement that prevents you setting the initial threshold of an income tax or prevents you changing universal credit? What's going to happen when the Scottish Conservative Party promises in its election manifesto that it's going to cut taxation? How credible is that if that affects the block grant available for the United Kingdom? All these issues have to be discussed, and under the Smith proposals, universal credit will remain a reserved matter, while Holyrood will be able to vary the frequency of payments and the way it is paid, while the power to vary the remaining elements of the universal credit will remain reserved. Well, I ask why? Actually, I've read the Smith Commission. Why? Responsibility.
Well, I think the reason that it's been reserved is that if Scotland decided to have a more generous universal credit, the issue then arises of how do they pay for it. And what you find with fiscal independence is that you've got to delegate both sides of the equation, both the raising of the money and the spending of it, and then you can decide how much you want to spend.
Full fiscal autonomy results in full responsibility. That's what real parliaments do. Responsibility for bereavement allowance, bereavement payment, child benefit, guardian's allowance, maternity allowance, statutory maternity pay, statutory sick pay, and widowed parents' allowance will all remain reserved and administered by the Department for Work and Pensions. Why? The Smith Commission further proposes a complex system for sharing responsibility for income tax. Why? And this is all affected by an oscillating block grant. How can you promise lower taxes in an election, as I've said, or higher spending if you're not masters of your own fate? And what are the objections to full Home Rule? What are the real objections to full fiscal autonomy, apart from the fact that we appointed a Lord Smith to produce a report with lots of, no doubt, very worthwhile people, and it's been overtaken by events? Now, we're told that full fiscal autonomy will result in tax competition within the Union. What's wrong with that? That's what keeps the American states vibrant and competitive with one another, continually innovating. Don't we insist that our taxes here in Britain are competing with those of Europe? We're told tax competition will create a downward pressure on taxes. Well, I'm sorry about that. But why shouldn't the Scottish Parliament lower air passenger duty or raise it, or do whatever it likes? It has had that power, I know. They allowed that power under Smith. But if that power, why not a power for other things? Now, my honourable friend said in the second reading debate that a single currency requires fiscal and monetary union. And the Greek, and I think the implication of what he said is the Greek experience proves it. But surely he is not suggesting that the Scots are Greeks, or that the Scottish economy is as different to England's as Germany's is to Greece. No, Scotland can thrive with full fiscal autonomy because Scotland has the will and skills to do so. Scotland has universities, research, manufacturing, logistics, light manufacturing, oil and gas, food and drink, and a flourishing creative sector. Vote for my amendment.
I'm very grateful to my right honourable friend for giving way once more, and I agree with all the wonderful things he's been saying about Scotland, which are clearly and self-evidently true. But the point I was trying to make is that if a country has fiscal autonomy and issues debt in a currency other than its own, it may well get squeezed in the way seen not only by Greece, but by Italy and Spain, and in the 1990s, during the Asian financial crisis, by countries across Asia, that having fiscal autonomy without your own currency is a recipe for economic failure. And if you want to go back more historically, in the 1930s, the same was true with the gold standard.
Well, that is a very fair point. I agree it is a matter for debate. I've already made the point that Scotland is a very different situation from that of Greece, and I am actually suggesting that we remain a United Kingdom with a sharing of national debt. Nothing is more debilitating, this whole debate, than saying, that bit of the national debt is yours, or this bit is mine. And we're back to the same dreary arguments about who is responsible for spending when. So my honourable friend makes a serious point. And actually, there is, if we achieve full fiscal autonomy, which I believe, by the way, is absolutely inevitable, it's going to happen anyway. Whether it happens now or in 5 years' time, it's going to happen. The Scottish Parliament, the Scottish Parliament and government just have to act responsibly and live within their means, and I have confidence they will do so. I give way to the right honourable gentleman.
I can feel the sap rising at various points of the honourable gentleman's speech, but when he said that Scotland was where Ireland was in the early years of the last century, I felt obliged to check the record, because last week he said we were where Ireland was in the 1880s. We seem to have advanced 20 years in a week. Does this mean in a week's time we'll be where Ireland was in the 1920s?
Well, I think that's a very amusing point, but I think the right honourable gentleman knows exactly what I'm trying to say. It is, again, a very serious point. It's not just a debating point, that actually we do have a responsibility to learn from history. And what I was saying last week, and what I do believe, is that we were wrong to abolish the Irish Parliament. We were wrong to delay granting Catholic emancipation. We were wrong not to listen to Gladstone in the 1880s. We were wrong not to implement full Home Rule at the outset of the Great War. We were wrong, and wrong again. And what I think we have to be is have an element of statesmanship in these affairs and an element of vision. And the right honourable gentleman, with all his debating skills, can laugh at what I say. But I do assure him that I genuinely believe what I'm trying to do. Yeah.
Highlighting all these wrongs, does he think that Irish independence was wrong?
Actually, if we had granted Home Rule in the 1880s, or if we had implemented the Home Rule Act in August 1914, I think it's very probable that Irish would have remained either in the Union or as a Dominion. So, of course I regret that Ireland chose to break through. There was a tragic civil war, and this is not going to happen, we know, in Scotland, but there was the history of Ireland is a history of tragedy and missed opportunities. And nobody's suggesting that we're going to go down that route with Scotland, but let's just learn a bit from history and try and be creative in these matters.
I thank my honourable friend. I'm just a little puzzled. Just for the record, he's not equating the subjugation of the Irish and the very evident tragic history of Ireland from the Norman period right through to the 20th century with Scotland, which is a modern, liberal, democratic country with a successful economy as part of the United Kingdom.
No, absolutely not, and I don't want to overplay the analogy. All I'm saying is that whilst Scotland, in my view, as a fervent, I would say almost romantic unionist, I believe that Scotland has benefited enormously from being in the Union. It has been a union based on an element of trust and shared responsibility, and I wouldn't in any way suggest that the Scottish people have suffered in any way in the same way as the Irish people suffered in the 18th century. And if I was giving that impression, I apologise. It was not my aim at all. The only point I was trying to make is that in these debates, you have to realise when there's a certain inevitability. If we know that full fiscal autonomy is going to come, it's better to have a serious discussion now on how to achieve it. So I believe this is an historic opportunity. Well, I must finish soon because I'm going to weary the House, but, well, all right.
I think one of the important points that was raised there was about opportunity, and there is a real sadness, I think, when you look back over the course of the last 100 years, that Scotland has lost from immigration a net 2 million people. And that's one of the reasons why we want powers of our own economy, to grow Scotland, to make sure that we don't see tens of thousands of our young people immigrating, educating in Scotland and then contributing to countries abroad. We need to grow the Scottish economy. That's why we need the powers over our economy to do so.
Well, most of them seem to have come down here and run us, but there we are. And they've done very well, and we've benefited, yes.
Thank you very much. As one of the only Irish or Northern Irish people here, I'm glad to hear you confirm that you see Northern Ireland as part of the Union, and I'd accept the fact that many of the Scots came our way, and we see ourselves very much as part of the Union. And what I'm concerned with today is we are moving forward before we've thought not just of Northern Ireland but of Wales. We need a convention, we need to know where we're going, and we're going to put ourselves into a form that we can't come back from. And if you look at what's happening in Northern Ireland today, we've very nearly got ourselves to a totally dysfunctional government that we can't come back from. I am nervous that we're going too far, too quickly.
So again, that's a very fair point. But I do think I'm all in favour of. I don't mind having conventions, but I think we are politicians. I mean, we've got to decide what we want. We decide the principles, and then once you've decided the principles, by all means, you employ distinguished people like Lord Smith or accountants or tax lawyers, whatever you like, to work out how it's done. But let's not just push this into the long grass and have a convention of great and good lasting for years, wall-to-wall lawyers. Let's in this House decide what we want. So I believe this is an historic opportunity to cut through the negativity of the doomsayers, of the £7 billion black holers. Give Scotland control of its oil revenues and taxes and decide its own priorities. Tax oil and encourage exploration and determine how you should tax it as the oil runs out. Then we are one union based on solidarity and need. The UK subsidises Northern Ireland to preserve peace. Why shouldn't we, on the basis of need, subsidise Scotland? I'm very happy with that. Are we not brothers and sisters in this union? Should we not help each other if needed? Our principle should not be the politics of fear, but I believe the statesmanship of hope. So my new clause delivers what I think Scotland wants. Power to run our own affairs, but with the consolation of knowing that there is a secure foundation stone against catastrophic shocks, as in 1929 and 2008. I would wish there to be solidarity on pension liability and national debt, and that is to be shared. We shouldn't be saying this is your debt or your bit of it. We should say it's our debt. And to ensure, too, that we have peace through security, that we share a single defence and foreign policy, not a division based on the old alliance of the times before James I and VI rode south, but the union that has given us 400 years of shared identity and prosperity. Those who want to slowly leak this power and that function are setting a trajectory, however slowly, towards independence.
Thank you very much. I'm grateful to the honourable member. There is one part of his amendment that he may well be coming to that did strike me as slightly curious, and that is the part on keeping treason reserved. Is there a modern-day William Wallace or Mary Queen of Scots in our midst that he sees the need to keep that power reserved?
I took advice from the clerks. All right, I'll surrender treason if they want. Particularly to him. The Smith Commission itself admits, and I quote, "A challenge facing both parliaments is a relatively weak understanding of the current devolution settlement." Well, what a glorious understatement. This is not surprising, its report further concedes, given what is a complex balance of powers. They've just created a complex balance of powers, and I don't think there's a single member of Parliament who actually understands what's going to happen under Smith. We need to move to a more federal arrangement whereby the four nations have broadly equal powers. Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland should have devolved legislatures, with the English MPs at Westminster deciding the same for England, then acting as a pan-European Parliament alongside MPs elected from the devolved countries as well. Now, the Prime Minister, and I'm now coming to an end, the Prime Minister promised Scotland, and I quote, "the strongest devolved government anywhere in the world." And the Scottish people rejected full independence. I suspect they want full home rule. But will those who've argued for full fiscal autonomy now vote for it? Or will they vote for further delay or deeper fudge? Will they go on blaming the United Kingdom government for what goes wrong, or have the courage to grasp what they say they want? Full fiscal autonomy is inevitable. I beg to move my new clause.